Alright, so if you guys have been following Omar Isuf recently, I'm sure that you saw his Buttwink video that he put out on specifically external rotation at the shoulder relating to the low bar squat. Omar's main point, if you haven't seen the video, I'll put it in the description below, or I may link it up here. But if you haven't seen the video, the whole premise is that if you don't have the requisite external rotation at the shoulder to about 90 degrees, then in order to get into a low bar position with the bar lower on the rear delts, you're going to have to hyperextend the spine instead of being able to allow the shoulder to rotate back and hold the bar in position. Which, when you hyperextend the spine, I'm in this position, overextended as I'm going to squat, at a certain point, my hips will tuck under. That's what Buttwink is, a posterior pelvic tilt. Omar's right in his assessment. If you don't have the external rotation at the shoulder, clearly you're going to extend with the spine, which is going to lead to feedback within the hips during the squat. But the one thing that you have to consider is there an anatomical asymmetry that is present which may lead to a difference in elbow position? For example, I played baseball for 10 years growing up. And if you look at specifically pitchers or infielders, those that go through a lot of external rotation to internal rotation cycles, what you're going to find is that anatomically they're getting bony deformations over time. So in throwers, typically, especially pitchers and catchers, when they're having to go through all these external to internal rotation cycles, they're going to get more layback or external rotation in their throwing arm. Now, I can't stretch this any further, and this one I'm not fighting to get back into that position. That's just where it is naturally. That's where it feels good. Similarly, now when I come into internal rotation, I'm going to have a much larger deficit because this arm is stuck in external rotation. So there's not anything that I can do to stretch that per se, because now I've had a torsion of my humerus over time that my body has just adapted to. It's not bad, it's just a sport-specific adaptation, and the cost from the demands that I put on my arm from going through all of these cycles. So, when we're thinking back into the squat and we're thinking from a lifting perspective, everybody wants to be symmetrical, right and left, anterior and posterior. However, if we have this bony deformation present, you're never going to be symmetrical. You're never going to stretch yourself out of that position. So, what you have to think about, or what you have to assess, is in terms of external rotation of the shoulder relating to Omar's video, if you got 90 degrees, hey, great. If you have more than 90 degrees to the position where you're really far back, then when the bar sits on your back, you may be able to get that one elbow much lower and underneath the bar than the other one. Is there anything inherently wrong with that? Well, it could put a little bit of torsion on your spine, but over time, it's not going to be a big issue because that's just the anatomical positioning of your bones, and you're not going to be able to change that. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're watching these videos and saying, yeah, I want to be symmetrical, I want to make sure that I have 90 degrees both sides. Well, hey, guess what? If you played a throwing sport or an overhead sport such as tennis, you may have a rotation within the bone itself that you're not going to be able to change or overcome. Just something to keep in mind.